So I think just to start, I mean,
of course,
there's great opportunity on Africa.
Yes.
SMEs, startups, leveraging of technology play absolute critical role.
Certainly.
I've talked about the forecast or the historical growth of being, I mean, for the last 2 years, probably plus or minus $10 billion is gone in terms of venture capitalists investing in startups.
Yeah.
Similar to your organization, which is doing great stuff.
Thank you.
But maybe just to start off, Shadrach, what is driving this SME startup growth of the African continent at the moment?
Brilliant. I think after decades of the Africa Rising initiative, the continent is finally rising, but perhaps not in a way that the continent's forefathers had imagined it.
Okay.
It's now happening in the boardrooms, it's now happening in the tech hubs. And it's a good thing. But I think personally, as both an entrepreneur and a founder, and I will make a distinction there, having worn both heads of entrepreneur and founder on the one hand, having been across the chasm in terms of the tale of two businesses, the SME model and the startup model.
Okay.
I think I'll be distinguishing there. It's a risk that Africa is rising, but we run the risk as well of having poor cousins. Because, and I'm referring to the SMEs. The poor cousins, because most of that dollar figure that you shared earlier on in your question, Doc, is that almost 99% of that figure, none of it went to actually the SME side, if you're to look at it. Because if you're to follow the money, VC checkbooks often goes not just to even startups, but to the tech side of the startups.
But
so
why? Is that a bad thing?
Is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing? Let me use one word that came up in our prior discussion to this. The word industrialization.
Yes.
I think the word industrialization is what really unpacks the tale of two businesses or the tale of two models. Let me make it practical. The word industrialization, which is scale. You have Alice, you have Ben.
Yes.
They are starting out at the beginning.
Yes.
When you look at that dollar figure. Alice decides she's going to become a startup founder and she's going to go into tech. But in cleaning business. Ben decides, I'm actually going to go into the cleaning business, but I'm going to go more organic. I'm going to start an SME. What is the distinguishing difference? Alice, from the word go, doesn't have to move from local to global. By mere fact of her putting her hand up and saying, I want to become a tech founder, by default, she's competing globally from the word go. And I'm going to elaborate in a moment. But Ben, on the other hand, is going into the cleaning business. Let's say he's setting up Ben and Sons trading enterprises in Africa. Alice is setting up, let's give it a name, Spark Clean tech company. So Ben would be a guy who goes door to door. He's knocking door to door, looking for clients.
So the traditional
manner, door to door, manual, and also Ben. By the way, Ben is a men's man. Ben, his clients, once he acquires them in year one, maybe he'll acquire 20 clients. They know this brother personally. They're on a first-name basis with him, and he most likely will get the most loyal clients because
relationships
his
count.
Kids play with their kids. Relationship counts, but there's a danger. As much as he has got the charm, he's got relationship, Alice has got scale. And that's why when you follow the money, when you follow that dollar figure, you find that a lot of it ends up with the Alice's of this world. Here's why. Tech startups, they outline the extreme sports of what scale looks like. Whether in Africa, whether in the US, whether in the West. And why does scale matter? Scale matters because Alice, from the word go, she'll know that she's being measured globally. She'll know that she wants to get global VC dollars and local ones if she can. And so she will put measures in place. She will be measured on how fast can she move from zero to $1 billion within 18 to 24 months. But Ben, who's counting? Ben is thinking, if my doors are open this month end, I'm good. I'm succeeding. If I stay in the game, my friends, my drinking buddies are not staying in the game. So right there, you realize why VC dollars tend to follow the Alice's of this world, because VC dollars are looking for scale. They're looking for structure. They're looking. Think about it as a supercar. How when you look at that 0 to 100, is this supercar going to follow 2.5 seconds? seconds? Is it going to be maxing out 100 in 1.5 seconds? So Alice really is in the fast lane, but Ben is on the. It doesn't matter what I use donkeys or I end up using my father's inherited van. If I move from A to B, Alice is thinking, how do I move from A to Z? And how instantly can I do that? Because that's what VCs are looking for. They're looking for scale, they're looking for growth, and they're also looking for an assurance of how quickly can Alice reach her 30,000th customer. Ben is thinking, I gotta stay open.
I was talking about the VC report and tracking the VC startups, and it aligns to what you're saying, because at the end of the day, people want to invest where there's growth and high returns.
Certainly.
Coming back to your point in terms of scaling, when you track those trends that are supporting the startups, the SMEs have a role to play. We can't run away from that.
Excuse me.
But in terms of growth and high growth in a quick period of time, that's where your startups come, especially from a tech perspective.
Absolutely.
There is a growing demand with regards to the VCs investing in those startups, those tech startups,
definitely,
that have a focus in solving Africa's problem. And I know I'm now triggering into your heartbeat, because I'm looking at your e-farm, and I know there's a great story there with it. But I'm going to come back there,
of course,
because in Africa we say there's no hurry. So we'll come back there. But I want to just zone in at a more Africa perspective, because your story with e-farm is absolutely impressive.
Certainly.
When you look at now we've talked about SME startups, we look at the growth. Countries like Nigeria, countries like Egypt, Ethiopia,
Kenya,
and I know you've dabbled in those countries from exposure. You speak at a lot of conferences. There's also South Africa. When you look at Africa, which are the sectors that are attracting the most significant investments in terms of startups or SMEs, and why?
Definitely. If you're to look at the Africa Continental Free Trade, one of its key metrics was how quickly can Africa get to a point where Africa transacts within itself. There's a dollar figure, 450 billion USD. How quickly would
I like figures.
Definitely. Would we be there by 2030, where there's an intercontinental trade? So when you look at that figure, figures can tell us a lot. Figures can tell us a lot, because when you go down the list of following the money, where the VC spend ends up going, you find that your fintech has been super attractive on the continent. So we need to transact with each other, whether we are in Africa or we're in Southern Americas or we're in the North. So fintech, by far, if you look at the last decade, has been an attraction pooling of the number one spend where VCs are signing checks.
And I think last year, 37% of the deals, and I'm talking about between 2022 2023, 37% of the deals were specifically around fintech that we invested in terms of startups.
There we go. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because part of why such opportunities exist, checkbooks tend to follow opportunities, but on the leading end, opportunities tend to follow problems. You see?
Fair enough.
So Africa's
we've got a lot of problems.
Hey, dog. We have tons. So now where the challenge exists is, how do we reorganize ourselves so that we move away from the model of glamorizing industrialization? We also take industrialization beyond policy and beyond academia, and also we get to invite the SMEs, because the SMEs matter. I did say that they run the risk of becoming the poor cousins, but if you notice, they carry majority of the employment. And then startups are coming in.
I think that's an important thing, because what we tend to forget is that because startups leverage off technology, and they've got the positives of a global footprint, scalability. You don't need to employ a lot of people.
There we go.
To operate successfully.
To move with agility.
But with SMEs, because they are more grassroots based, the element of leveraging off and creating tangible employment is another. So there is that also pros and cons.
The tension. Yes. So that's why the SMEs might have to reorganize and reconsider whether they still want to be excluded from the economic dinner table in terms of raising checks, you see. So there's a certain level of digitizing that SMEs might need to consider to segue into, so that they're not fully left out on the periphery. And then, of course, tech startups, we do create jobs, but we not create them at the level of the SMEs. So I think earlier on when I said that one has to follow the dollar spend. So there's problems at the head. If you think about the locomotive, there's problems there. And then, of course, then there's opportunities. Then there's the checks. For Africa to to now move towards ensuring that majority of VC spend doesn't come from outside. It starts to come from within, and majority of ownership of the IP, ownership of the things that actually unlock the key economic drivers. We need to have a discussion with ourselves whereby we get to revisit as to how do we want to leverage these opportunities? How do we as Africans want to solve? Of course, the West is welcome, but how do we self-organize so that we retain value?
Now, coming back in terms of we, as African, you and I are sons of the soil.
Amen.
And one of the things I always highlight with regards to, I remember when one of my old bosses, he's now in Saudi, always used to say to me that economies do not grow by consumption. They grow by productivity.
That's powerful.
And if we are just consuming, whether it's a country, whether it's a continent or a people group, you are not going to economically grow.
There we go.
But that's why the role of industrialization is important.
Certainly.
But for industrialization to grow, obviously startups and SMEs come into play.
Absolutely.
Now, 2050, I think half of the world's 30 or 40% of the world's population will be in Africa, and a large part of that will be youth. Everybody's still going to need to eat.
Certainly.
And the reason I'm highlighting this, and I'm looking at your nice branded outfit, e-Farmer.
Thank you, Kant.
Tell us a bit, because it touches on startups, it touches on technology, it talks in terms of contributing to industrialization in Africa.
Certainly.
Tell me a bit about e-Farmer and how your experience with regards to working with startups and starting from scratch is making a significance and the importance of that.
Great question. So, as a son of the soil, to borrow your word there, I was born and raised in a village where I was raised by two highly industrious matriarchs. My late gran, who was a coffee farmer, and my mom, who was a crop farmer. So, man, between these two women, they had me on a straight and narrow. And then I've come to the big city. That's where I had the privilege to work in corporate as well. And my last corporate role was with Deloitte, where I got to really, I had the privilege to count you as a colleague and a big brother. And of course, I then...
You're making me blush.
I don't take that lightly, Doc. And of course, I got to now segue, when I left corporate, when I left my last corporate role, Deloitte, I got to segue into the SME side of my life, where for about 10 years, for about a decade, I was kind of like trying out being on the route that Ben was on, running a private practice. And of course, when 2020 came, it had its own conundrums for the world. But that's where my family and I got to pivot into the startup sector, where we got to pivot into technology, and that landed itself into e-Farmer. Because
so were you forced by circumstances to pivot?
Circumstances have a way of nudging you. Very, to give you a very strong nudge, where we realized, and one of those things, if you look at the president of the World Bank, His Excellency Adesina,
Honorable Africa Development Bank.
Africa Development Bank, If you notice his beginning, to show you e-Farmer, his earlier beginning, before he segued into that role, he was actually the Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria. And if you notice how he pivoted, one of the things that worried him and kept him awake is how Africa's food deficit or production deficit sees Africa importing, I think we are approaching about $100 billion, or more or less 80% of our food consumption. So it means we are a consumption destination in terms of compared to being either production or becoming prosumers, meaning we produce what we consume. So e-Farmer is born at that nexus where there is a need to simplify trade between farmers now connecting to buyers. So that's the first thing. And of course, that puts us into e-commerce, that puts us into logistics tech, that puts us also into traceability of food.
Now just touching on that before, that's absolutely important, because if we look at those trends of the growing startup tech areas, that are sectors that are growing in Africa. First is fintech, followed by commerce. Then clean tech, which is also coming through.
There we go.
Logitech, as well as agri-tech. So and obviously edutech is also coming
on
through.
The rise.
So that each of those has been touched, highlighting the point with regards to the opportunities.
Definitely.